The best of the Morning X
with Barnes, Leslie, and Jimmy.
99X.
This is something I've always wanted to do, talk to one of these guys. Guy's name is Mike McManus. He is currently a DEA supervisor. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning.
Now, Mike, first thing, the obvious question. You work for the DEA, and you have gone undercover, and you have foiled a major drug operation. Is it a good idea for you to be going public?
Well, this is something that happened about 10 years ago. When we were approached by Arrest and Trial, they had asked us to provide us with some investigations that have obviously been gone through the court system and have been cleared. Part of our responsibilities, and not all of it involves undercover work, is in certain situations to go in undercover capacity to infiltrate some of these drug organizations. In this particular case, this was a case that took place back in the 1980s, and of course this was the height of the cocaine wars down in South Florida. And predominantly, many of us as DEA agents working in the South Florida area posed as drug smugglers. We were agents who were in a position to provide transportation to members of the cartels to move their cocaine out of Colombia into the United States.
Doesn't that take forever to get even up to par with these guys so they trust you and believe that you're actually who you say you are? I mean,
good question. Talk a little bit about how do you get these guys to trust you and not suspect that you're a narc?
Do you have to do coke with them? Do you have to?
Right.
I mean, do you have to?
You have to kill a guy?
Play their
what?
game? Yeah.
Well, no, seriously.
No, we don't do any coke, and we don't have to kill anybody, and there's no gang rituals that we have to go through. We rely on good intelligence information that is often provided by our counterparts down in South America, and what we do is we also rely on confidential sources, commonly referred to as informants. Quite often, these confidential sources may have been arrested in the past. They may be coming to DEA to work for money. There's a variety of different reasons that people are motivated to cooperate with the government. In this particular situation, we used a confidential source who had been working with the cartel for a number of years, a very trusted person in part of the organization. He had gotten into trouble in the South Florida area and was looking to help himself. And what we did is we put him in a position where he was, again, working with the cartel, with members of the cartel who actually were based in the Bahamas. And with that information, he was able to introduce me in an undercover capacity to members of the organization who were actually Bahamian traffickers in Miami. And we set up an undercover meeting where basically he vouched for me. He vouched that I was, in fact, a smuggler who had the resources available to move large quantities of cocaine out of Colombia into the United States through the Bahamas.
Now, how long were you undercover? What was the length of time?
This investigation lasted about 6 months.
Now, when that happens, you cease all contact with your family and friends?
No, I don't. We're very careful about where we go, how we set up our undercover meetings, but I still maintain contact with my family. I still maintain contact with friends. But when we go into an undercover situation, and again, I'm not living with these people every day. We're setting up undercover meetings, and this is looked at as a business. When it is appropriate, we will meet together to discuss some final arrangements. Much of the negotiations actually took place over the phone, where I had a cell phone, they had a phone, we would go to pay phones. We would pre-establish meeting times where we'd go to different phones and make phone calls. In this particular investigation, I had over 30 taped telephone calls during several months where we went back and forth negotiating the final arrangements. When it came down to very important, critical situations, we would meet in certain hotels in the Miami area where they would give me such things as the coordinates to the landing strip in South America. I would bring my undercover pilot in, where the pilot would then get specific instructions as to what code words and radio frequencies would be utilized when he landed his plane in the Guajira Peninsula. So whenever we got down to that point, we had to do some face-to-face negotiations.
Were there moments where you thought, you know what, they know?
Right.
Not in this particular investigation. There have been other investigations where they have come out and said, you know, you're a cop. We know you're a cop. We've been following you, that type of stuff.
What do you do then?
Do you have to answer them truthfully if they say, are you a cop, or they ask you the question?
Well, no, we don't have to answer them truthfully, and we're not going to give up an investigation just because somebody says to me, are you a police officer?
But if a guy comes to you, if one of the guys you're working with says, hey, we know you're a cop, we've been following you, what do you do? Just deny, or
then I turn around and ask him, how come you're so stupid to be standing here in front of me then? At that point, you do deny, and you put yourself in a position where you do not allow yourself to be followed. I mean, we have surveillance agents out there covering our agents in an undercover capacity. We just don't walk out the front door of DEA and tell our supervisors, hey, well, I'll be back in a couple of hours. I mean, we set operational plans. We know where and when we're going to meet the suspects. So there's a number of safety measures that take place prior to any undercover meetings, as well as after undercover meetings. So safety is a number one concern for DEA about its agents, especially when they go undercover.
You said you met at hotels. Were these seedy hotels, or were you at the Ritz?
Actually, both. We met at some local small hotels around the Miami International Airport, and we also met at some very exclusive hotels in the South Florida area. When we would have lunch or cocktails or something of that nature, where we were meeting to get information, there were times that we would meet over on Miami Beach. If it was a quick meeting and it had something, we had to make a quick introduction to somebody. In this particular case, I was being contracted by a group of medical doctors in the South Florida area. These medical doctors were hiring me to move 529 keys of coke out of Colombia into the United States.
Mike, when we see in the movies, movies like Donnie Brasco, where a guy's going undercover, they always show how the undercover cop at some point starts actually sympathizing with the people with whom he's, really turncoating on. I'm wondering, at any point, did you have any relationship with these guys that you almost felt bad that you were going to, at the end, turn them in?
Well, there was actually a point in the very late stages of the investigation, approximately a week before this whole operation went down. I was invited to one of the doctor's homes for dinner. And at that time, I met with his wife and children, and we had meetings that took place out on the back porch, and we were finalizing the negotiations. And at that point, you realize that, within a week, this guy's going to jail, and he's going to jail for a long period of time.
Because of you.
And because of what we're doing and what he's doing. I mean, he's the one that contracted us. He's the one that was in the dope business. And you're looking there, and you realize that, his wife and kids are going to be without this guy for a number of years. And, you don't feel sorry for him, but in some respects, you have to realize that, this is a tragedy, but it's an unfortunate situation.
Did you ever see any violence in your tenure there? Were you witnessed any of that, like Scarface-type violence?
Yes, I mean, we had in Miami, we had a group dedicated to working with Metro-Dade Homicide Division and the City of Miami Police Department. It was Operation Red Rum. Red Rum is actually murder spelled backwards.
Right.
Red Rum itself is a group of agents as well as local police officers who investigate drug-related homicides. And there were Red Rum operations in New York and Miami as well as in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Those particular operations were designed to identify cocaine trafficking organizations that were involved in murder and kidnappings, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. And what happened? What were you witness to?
Well, you saw a number of drug-related hits that took place down in the South Florida area. Some traffickers were actually kidnapped and tortured. The Red Rum investigations identified there were actually one of the more famous ones was at a mall down in the South Florida area in the early 80s where they just went in with MAC-10 machine guns and began shooting up cars and killing several people. The Red Rum agents were involved in investigations where they found dead bodies in the Everglades. They had cars that had been submerged in canals with bodies inside, things of that nature.
There's more to the story. This bit resumes after a brief intermission. More Best of the Morning X is coming up next on 99X.